Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to WASA Distance Education. This is NBV3E, and today we're going to move into a different area. We pretty well finished up with the justice topics that we have been discussing for the last couple of days. Um, Now, I wanted to go back to um, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. If I was going to rewrite this course again, I just inherited this course as it is. I would use the Truth and Reconciliation's 94 calls to action as a hinge point to discuss a lot of the issues that the Indigenous people are facing today, a lot of the issues that the rest of the population uh, of Canada are facing today because we are all treaty people. So, now, up on the board here, let me get rid of this right here. Just make sure that I have, uh, I'm being recorded. Yes, I am. Okay. So, over here on the um, screen, we have the 90, how the main areas that the 94 calls of action. Uh, just hold on a second while I give myself. Okay, sorry. So, the 94 calls for action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission are broken down into topic areas. um, Now, we didn't cover child welfare to any degree, so I would really like to touch on that before the end of the course. Um, we did discuss. Uh, Justice a great deal, and uh, health and language and culture. But today we're going to dig into education, and with that, we will talk about how um, different institutions in Ontario and Canada are trying to deliver on the some of these 94 calls of action. That's what we've seen in the last couple of years, ever since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that a lot of institutions, both public and private, have been trying to um, um, uh, follow time to rectify these calls for actions, make steps to make things better. Okay, so right now I wanted to go to, uh, excuse me, okay, page 15 of the lesson we started in on yesterday. And this lesson that we started on yesterday is Education for Life. And the reading that you need to do for this is pages 284 to 298 in your text. We'll have a look at those pages a little later. And yesterday we talked about the difference between traditional indigenous education and the education provincial systems that we have in our country, and how indigenous people haven't done fairly well. There's a high dropout rate, um, and low literacy rate as well, and so people are trying to uh, fix that up, make that better. Um, Interestingly, uh, the education system is one of the vehicles in which um, express or which created this systemic racism for Indigenous people, and now, as is suggested by the um, Truth um, and Reconciliation, is education should be used to um, improve and rectify the problems that it created years ago. So, this topic area that we will look at first of all is called the New Whale on page 15. Sean Atleo, he was one of the past national chiefs of the Assembly of First Nations, describes education as the new whale. He is a hereditary chief of a nation on Vancouver Island that traditionally depended on food from the ocean, like the whale, for survival, renewal, and sustenance. He sees education as a key to economic and social health, the means to retain languages, history, teachings, and values while increasing understanding with the rest of Canada. Access to post secondary education is controversial, but it is critical to our um, Aboriginal peoples and to the future of Canadian society. First Nations youth are the fastest growing segment of our population. Their share of the labor force will triple over the next 20 years. There are statistics that Canadians ignore at these are statistics that Canadians ignore at their peril. Some have argued that access to education at all levels is a treaty right. The federal government sees its responsibilities ending with secondary school, but provides some funding for post secondary education to registered status Indian and Inuit students. These differences in opinion and funding gaps are why Aboriginal people want control over their own higher educational institutions. Um, there's a section here that's taken right from the text, Voices of the Peoples. In 2008, 13-year-old Shannon Kustashian was one of many Muskegowug Cree protesting about conditions at her school in Atawaspicat, an isolated fly-in community on James Bay. Um, I wonder if that's the same Muskie uh, what's titled Swampy Cree that comes up from that is located mm, around, um, but oh, what's that community called again? Pew, 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 no, it's well, I know that Port Severn is in Swampy Key Cree area, and I was just thinking Peawanuck. Yes, that's what I was thinking because I used to listen to some video recordings of Lewis Bird from Peawanuck. He has this great site. Unfortunately, it's shut down right now for being revamped, and it has all these stories about the Swampy Cree in his area. So I think Muskegowug is another pronunciation of Swampy Cree. Anyways, um, let's read what Shannon says. I don't want others to go to school in portables that leak, with windows that don't open, washroom doors that don't close, and ceilings that are cracked. This is not an atmosphere for learning. All students in Canada deserve a learning environment that they are proud to attend. That gives them hope. We want the same hope as every other Canadian student. Why was she protesting about her school? The Atawaspskat Education Authority, funded by the federal government, closed the elementary school in 2000 due to health problems reported after a 1979 diesel spill. When the Education Authority closed the school, the federal government provided portables and agreed to plan for a new school. However, the plan was canceled. In 2009, Indian and Northern Affairs Canada announced that the community had been awarded funding for school design and construction. It always seems to me that every community up north should have like a central um, area where they have an education um, uh, building, right? To include all of the different, well, of course, the secondary and public or elementary schools, and then all of the other uh, um, types of education that people um, may want to participate in, including like university programs or college programs, trades programs, and have it all set up there as being central in the community. Um, and having all the people, all the different teachers and helpers connected there in the one building. Um, Anyways, that's what is my thought, and I think it would. I think in some communities they have something like that, but the government has been pretty cheap on offering First Nations people, students, options here, um, and if they, planned it out properly to, um, you know, build these schools, then they could, with the internet nowadays, they can all be connected. Like we do have up north there, KIHS, that they have a pretty decent model for high school. Not perfect, of course, but well, we'll talk about the different options that are available um, later on. Okay, so support question number 3: why do you think education is such an important issue for Aboriginal peoples? Well, one thing, right, the history of the education system with the Aboriginal peoples has been pretty gray, dark, and people have lost faith. So the education system must reinstall faith um, that it can offer something that will improve people's lives. Now, the youth are youth, and to get youth to go to school is another problem, and that happens everywhere, right? Um, okay, so the key question is key question 17 on page 17. Just bear with me for a second. Okay, so let's take a look at these key questions, or these questions in the key question on page 17 and 18, and then we'll flip over to the textbook and see if we can pull out any of the answers from the reading that you will do to complete this key question. Key question number 17 from lesson 17, 1A. What has your experience of school been so far? Okay, so this is aimed at the individual students. That's you who are completing this course, right? So, you're taking a WASA course, and you're not enrolled then in regular programming, unless it's kind of an add-on, You could be at DFC or Pelican and taking this course as well there. Be truthful and honest about your school experience uh, and jot it down there. You can do it in point form. It's fine for this particular question. Um, 1B is what would you like your experience of education to be throughout your life? Okay, just think about that. What do you want? What do you want from education? Now, remember, education is a lifelong process. I mean, a lot of people think, well, I want to get that piece of paper there so I can either get a job or go on to college or whatever. But it doesn't stop there. Even if you go, let's say you go to work in the health field, and let's say you're a nurse or uh, what is it, an RNA. Um, you might want to um, climb up the ladder and maybe get a manager's type of job. And so you would need to maybe get a master's or whatever. Um, Also, too, technology is always changing. Let's say going back to the health fields again. And so you'll be having to constantly update on new technological processes that you are required in your job. Um, and uh, your employers will want you to do that. Otherwise, you might, um, you um, you could, cause an accident if you didn't, right? Because technology, as I said, changes as like now we're using AI, and so someone has to be taught how to use AI properly um, in any type of job. So, you know, think about education not just being that piece of paper, but something that you will have to continue with through the most part of your life. So, what would you like that experience to be like? Question two of key question 17 is read through the following voices of the people, page 296, and answer the following questions. How could the education system create more opportunities for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students? Okay, so it's been included here, um, that specific section of the book, um, on page 18. Let's read through this right now. Annie Aning Minyuk is an Inuk student studying environmental governance at the University of Guelph. Annie completed high school in uh, Pangnirtung, Nunavut, studied at Nunavut Savuna Savunik Savukt, a transitional college program in Ottawa, for 2 years and volunteered with Canada World Youth before Guelph. Let's read what she has to say. My community is 1,400 people, and probably when I went to high school, 90% of the population was Inuit. I remember being in elementary school and looking around. It was all the Inuit women being teachers, so it was always a very comfortable feeling. And then junior high, more Southern teachers, and more high school, completely Southern teachers. We were learning about farms and prairies when probably 80% of the people who were learning it haven't been anywhere near that kind of stuff. Just graduating from high school was a big accomplishment in my family. Nunavut Savunik Sabat was another huge thing for my entire family. With World Youth, I went to India for 3 months, and that's completely different from my community. I value my traveling experiences, like performing in Germany for 200 people and going to South Africa and learning about different cultures, counting trees in New Zealand. I never really really knew what to expect. So, first year was really hard for me. I didn't know anybody in Guelph. Every year I go to Guelph, I can say that I'm the only Inuit in all of Guelph. It gets a little bit lonely in terms of not being able to speak my language or having that connection. I'm completely fluent in writing and speaking Inuk Tiktut, except that I go home after that 8 months. I have to watch now I'm pronouncing words or make sure that I'm saying my sentences right. With Aboriginal students, a common theme when we're talking about what's troubling us us in school is always funding. Things that I worry about in school are funding and money and how and where I'm going to get the money for this $200 book that I need. And I always go back to thinking, what about our elders who don't have that degree? They're just as smart as that person that has that doctorate or something, because they have all this history in them and all these stories, and they know, for example, how to catch fish and with very limited resources. In terms of university and getting my degrees, I have two possible life goals. I want to be a teacher, but also I want to work for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Once more educated, you can help your people fight for that right, whatever it might be. Okay, so um, part there's a part B for question two. It follows immediately after this insert that we just read through. Let's read that right now. It's on page 18 at the bottom. What other factors are important in developing education, both in general and with specific relevance to the diversity of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in Canada? Okay, so with that, we're going to flip over now to the textbook. Okay, and so by scanning through the textbook, we should be able to pick up on some ideas, concepts, insights that will help us answer these questions in the best way that we can. All right, so let me bring that up here. Ba-ba, ba-ba. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I should have had this open previously. Oh, I don't want to download it. I want to open it up. Oh, let's see if I can download it. What's going on here? Oh no. uh, it won't let me open up. What's going on with Google here? Maybe, oh, you know what I have to probably do here? I'm probably going to have to, I didn't see it wanted me to log in. I bet you that it wants me to log in somehow. There we go. See that? Right? It wants me to log in. Okay. So I'm back in. Sometimes it doesn't tell. Lately, it hasn't been telling me that it wants me to sign back in, and then when I try to access a document, it won't let me do it. Okay, but I think that's our problem. So this might help us get back in here. All right, where are we? Okay. Um, Mm-mm, mm-mm. Oh, there we are. NBV3E resources. Okay, this should let me in now. Oh, hmm. Well, that kind of messes me up. Um, oh, it's going to let me download it. Oh, okay. Well, we get. All right. It lets me download, but it won't let me access the Google site. Okay. Well, there we are. There we do have Unit 4 here, and there we go. Chapter 9, Education for Life. We can at least look at the topic areas here, okay? And this will help you, will direct you towards where you want to um, find the information that you need to answer the questions. Okay, so uh, on pages 288, 289, we look at the legacy of the residential school system, which we looked at yesterday. Okay, so education today on page 290. Some people might think that all Canadian students have about the same educational experiences and opportunities, but this is far from the case. In reality, there is a glaring gap between the quality of education for Aboriginal and non Aboriginal students. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students have higher dropout rates, lower literacy rates, and less success with the education system. Access, opportunity, and funding. According to Canada's Constitution Act 1867 the and Constitution Act 1982, education is a provincial responsibility, and yet the federal government is to make laws for Indians and lands reserved for Indians. While this appears to be a contradiction, the Constitution Act of 1982 and 11 treaties between the federal government and various First Nations have no doubt that the federal government has primary responsibility for First Nations organization. This means First Nations, Status Indian, and non Status Indian, Métis, and Inuit students is a wide range of experiences and funding arrangements. Nunavut, which has a primary Inuit population, determines its own education policy and has embedded the Inuit. Wow, this is a really tough word for me to pronounce here. Kwajim Majatu Kangit. I hope I didn't mutilate that too bad. Guiding principles in its Education Act. In other areas of Canada, schools on reserves have often been federal schools operated by Aboriginal affairs in Northern Development Canada. But increasingly, First Nations band councils are running their own schools under agreements with AA and DC. That's, of course, Northern Development Canada. In Ontario, Six Nations and Tyendinaga reserves still have federal schools. On reserve schooling in Ontario uh, often goes only up to grade 8. So about half of the First Nations high schools in Ontario attend provincial public schools. Typically, when First Nations elementary or high school students attend provincial public schools, AANDC, or the First Nations Education Authority makes tuition agreements with the province. However, as you will learn in the coming pages, there can be significant funding differences among students under these agreements. Continuing on here, in the classroom and community, beyond the experience of industrial schools and residential schools, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students have often experienced stereotyping and racism, have not seen themselves reflected in what they are or were learning, and have not seen their values reflected in the classroom or school life. Additionally, families, and these are all very important things to help, you know, get kids into education, so that they feel comfortable about what they were learning. So, as an educational program, you try to get students, um, like, get them integrated into what they're learning. um, so that they can, make connections. Additionally, families and communities have felt excluded from school decisions, unwelcome or unnoticed. To some, the legacy of the residential school system and other assimilation policies has not been addressed. In summarizing the 1996 report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, Mi'kmaq scholar Dr. Marie Baptiste noted that the current curriculum in Canada projects European knowledge as universal, normative, and ideal. It marginalizes or excludes Aboriginal cultures, voices, and ways of knowing. Modern educational theory and practice have, in large part, destroyed or distorted the ways of life, histories, identities, cultures, and languages of Aboriginal peoples. So, for instance, I was several years ago. Boy, it's kind of foggy, but great workshops I had attended in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and there was one particular display there that um, showed the star system, right, with using I guess it would be, I think it was Cree. Mm, it was Cree. There's several other distinct um, dialects there that are different from our area as well, right? So you have Lakota, and I can't remember some of the other um, groups there, but Cree is big in Manitoba as well. So they had all the names of these different constellations, and you know how in our constellations, right, we have, let's say for instance, we have Leo, right, the lion, and Cancer, which is a crab shape. But they traditionally, indigenous people had, there was other um, um, creatures up there that represented the different star systems. And so this is something that, elders and people know about. But I'd say you wanted to take astronomy, for instance, you would be kind of disconnected with your past and history and learn something totally alien um, um, uh, and and something you're not familiar with, right? So this is kind of what happens when you get marginalized with your previous knowledge. That's just one small example. There's uh, many others as well. Um, okay, so there's another Voices of Peoples section here you should read through as well. I guess we should read that because this will be something that you may be able to pull on for answering your questions. Um, what was what has schooling been like beyond residential schools and reserve schools? So that's more nowadays. Um, Stowe Low, author Ernie Cray and Métis leader France Picot give their recollections. I attended a public school where I was made aware daily of the gap between my family's standard of living and that of my non Indian classmates. The town of Hope, British Columbia was a working class white community of loggers and miners mixed in with a few civil servants, social workers, and police officers. At school, I concentrated on surviving with some of my dignity intact. Actually, learning anything was secondary. At first, I was bright and eager to learn, but my initial openness was not reciprocated by either the teachers or the other students. My relationship with teachers was combative. They expected me to do poorly academically. I received little encouragement or help. I learned not to expect smiles from teachers. I stuck my hand up to answer a question, but I knew I wouldn't be called on. Teachers frequently showed their resentment at having me in the room by not including me in the lessons or in the social interaction between children in the classroom. I could expect to be treated curtly and summarily without warmth or respect. There were exceptions. I recall a teacher in Kokohala Elementary School, a young man who seemed to make no distinction between me and the other children. He went out of his way to encourage me. He'd draw my attention to Aboriginal role models in the fields of entertainment and athletics. He made me feel that I too could become a high achiever. He made me feel that, oh, sorry, my improved self esteem was reflected in the high marks I got in his class. When I got back at the history, when I look back at the history of schooling in Timmins, the early teachers were mostly young women who taught English and French students together in a one-room school. The Source assumption came when they segregated the schools into public and separate Catholic systems. Métis students were largely traumatized by the schools even though they were not residential schools. For the most part, Métis in Ontario attended either publicly or church-run schools. As part of the general student body, Métis students often face discrimination and racism from teachers, school administrators, and other students. Mischief was treated as a poor version of French. Okay, so that must be the language that the Métis spoke. And often there was a conflict between how Métis students saw themselves and how they were ignored or misrepresented in school textbooks. Children were often ridiculed publicly by the teacher because of the mischief uh, language. That's something new to me. I wasn't familiar with the specific language that the Métis spoke. There was little consideration for Métis families because of a lack of sensitivity and ignorance on the part of teachers in school and schools. Métis students, up until recently, could expect a much lower level of education, and most did not graduate. This is the historical basis upon which today Métis seek to reconcile, to forgive, but not forget. Generations later, the scars of this era for Métis students is still not being fully addressed, and our governments are fighting to ensure the history is not forgotten. in order to not repeat the past and to heal from a dark period in our history. While the issues surrounding residential school abuses are beginning to be addressed for First Nations, Métis students continue to fight for recognition and reconciliation. Moreover, the issue of day schools for all Aboriginal people has not yet been addressed. All right, so this is, we did look at both the effects of systemic racism on in the education system on um, Indigenous Indian peoples and on the Inuit, and so this little section was to include the Métis. Give us an idea of what the Métis experienced. All right, so from the bitter experience of educational policies designed to assimilate or isolate First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, uh, 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 education shapes, wait, sorry. From their bitter experience of educational policies designed to assimilate or isolate First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples know how powerful education is. Education shapes how people think, transmits cultural values, as well as facts, teaches communication and social skills, shows people where the creativity lies, and can shape the ways in which people will contribute to society. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples want the same authority other Canadians have through school boards and parent councils, the chance to have a say in what their children will become. As you read the perspectives in the coming pages, think about the list that what goals First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leaders, organizations, such as education authorities and communities, have been setting. All right, so here is more on uh, the new buffalo and the new whale, and we were introduced to that with Sean Atleo um, in our unit. So we'll try to get through this, and that should cover mostly what we need to pull on, right, for answering those key questions. So let's read through as much of this as we can get. Among Aboriginal leaders, many talk about the key role that education will play in the future of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. For example, Blair Stonechild is a member of the Mushkaupitung First Nation in Saskatchewan, um, a residential school survivor, and a professor of Indigenous studies. In his books, The New Buffalo, he explains why education, specifically post secondary education, is the new buffalo, just as the buffalo was the sustaining force for Stonechild's people. Stonechild sees education as the means to ensure survival, renewal, and sustainability. Sean A. in Shoot Atleo uses a similar metaphor. The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Chief Atleo, says that education is the new whale. Okay, and we did discuss that previously. Um, I'll just jump over to the next paragraph here because, yeah, um, Chief Atleo believes that Aboriginal communities will once again become healthy, economic, sustainable, and balanced. He sees education as a key for social and economic health, creating vital jobs, to other priorities such as governance and sustaining economic development. Soon after his election as national chief to the AFN, Chief Atleo wrote an article in February 2010 in the Globe and Mail entitled Education is the Key to Aboriginal and Canadian Potential. In it, he put investment in First Nations youth at the center of an agenda, with benefits for First Nations youth, First Nations community, and Canada as a whole. And so there is the speech right there where okay, we're running out of time, so I can't read that, but I'd like you to do that for homework, okay? It starts right here. It's on page 294. First Nations youth are the youngest and fastest growing segment of our population. All right? And then it continues on here at the bottom of the page, page 294. All right? And then 295, okay? Also read the Voices of the Peoples, 295 and 296 to complete our reading uh, for this lesson. All right, and remember uh, the key questions that you need to answer. They are on page 17 and 18. Okay, there's simply uh, well, there's several questions here. 1A and B, and then 2A and 2B on the next page. All right. If you have any questions or concerns about the key question or the lesson, uh, please contact me through the regular channels, Facebook or email, even phone, and we can discuss them in more depth. All right. So that pretty well covers everything that we want to look at today. Uh, Tomorrow we're going to dig into Lesson 18, Program Innovations, and we will be able to discover some of the um, uh, things that have developed because of truth and reconciliation, and how education is being used for cultural revitalization. So, thanks for listening in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our class today. As I said, we'll be back on air again tomorrow at the same time. Have a great evening, everyone, and bye for now.